What happens when a man who has everything decides it's all built on a lie? Donovan Sterling, a tech billionaire, stood in his marble-floored mansion and told his 9 months pregnant wife, Alice, to get out. He told her to leave with nothing but the clothes on her back, convinced she had betrayed him in the worst way possible. As she packed her few remaining belongings, he lingered, wanting one last look at the woman he now despised. But then he walked in as she whispered to their unborn child, and the words he heard would shatter his world far more than any corporate treason ever could. The Sterling penthouse on Park Avenue wasn't just a home. It was a declaration. It occupied the top 2 floors of a limestone monolith with panoramic windows that stared down the throat of Manhattan, making the city lights look like a carpet of fallen stars. For Alice Sterling, it had once been a fairy tale. Now 9 months pregnant and feeling as large and cumbersome as a ship in a bottle, it felt like the world's most beautiful prison. Donovan Sterling. Her husband was the architect of this world. A titan of the tech industry, he had clawed his way up from a working-class neighborhood in Queens to the zenith of global finance. His company Nexus Dynamics was his first child, his masterpiece of code and ruthless acquisition. He was a man of sharp angles and sharper intellect, with eyes the color of a stormy sea that saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. For 3 years, Alice had been his most prized asset. They had met at a gallery opening, a world Alice understood. She was an art historian, her passion lying in the quiet, dusty corners of museums in the stories a single brushstroke could tell. He'd been a whirlwind of charismatic energy, pursuing her with the same single-minded focus he applied to a hostile takeover. He loved her quiet grace, he'd said, the way she could find beauty in things others overlooked. She was his anchor, his peace in the relentless storm of his life. The first 2 years were a dizzying blur of private jets to Monaco winters in Aspen and summers sailing the Aegean. He showered her with gifts, a vintage Cartier watch, a first-edition Virginia Woolf novel, a custom-built greenhouse for her beloved orchids. She in turn gave him a home that wasn't just a showcase, but a sanctuary. She learned his moods, knew when to bring him a glass of Macallan 25 without him asking, and could soothe the tension from his shoulders with a simple touch. When she told him she was pregnant, he'd reacted with an uncharacteristic, almost boyish joy. He had held her in the middle of their cavernous living room, spinning her around as she laughed, her feet lifting off the Persian silk rug. "A son," he'd whispered into her hair. "An heir. Someone to leave all this to. Or a daughter," she'd countered, smiling. "Someone to teach how to take it all for herself." He'd laughed, a real, unguarded laugh she hadn't heard in months. For a while, things were perfect again. Donovan personally oversaw the construction of the nursery, importing sustainably harvested Scandinavian pine for the crib, and commissioning a famous muralist to paint a whimsical forest on the walls. He'd come home early, placing his hand on her swelling belly, his expression a mixture of awe and fierce pride. But over the last 3 months, a chill had seeped into their gilded cage. It started subtly. Donovan grew distant, his nights at the office becoming later and later. The easy laughter vanished, replaced by a tense, brooding silence. He would stare at his phone, his jaw tight, his thumb scrolling furiously. When she'd ask if something was wrong, he'd dismiss her with a curt, "Just business." The man who once couldn't bear to be in a different room from her now slept with a noticeable distance between them in their California king bed. The hand that used to rest protectively on her stomach now remained firmly on his own side. Alice felt the change like a drop in barometric pressure, a storm gathering just over the horizon. She tried to blame it on the stress of a new product launch she'd heard him yelling about on the phone. She tried to blame it on his anxieties about becoming a father. She tried to blame it on anything but the terrifying thought that was beginning to take root in her heart that he was falling out of love with her. The final definitive crack appeared a week before her due date. There was a gala for the New York Public Library, an event Alice had been looking forward to for months. She had a custom maternity gown made a sweep of emerald silk that made her feel elegant instead of ungainly. She'd spent an hour on her hair and makeup, wanting to see that old spark of admiration in his eyes. She found him in his study, a stark modern room of chrome and black leather. He was staring out the window, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand, his tuxedo jacket slung over a chair. "Donovan, we're going to be late," she said softly. He didn't turn. "I'm not going." "Not going, but you're one of the sponsors. People are expecting." "I don't care what people are expecting." He snapped his voice, sharp enough to cut glass. He finally turned, and his eyes were cold, devoid of any warmth. They were the eyes of a stranger. "Things have changed, Alice." "What things? What's going on?" "Talk to me," she pleaded, her hand instinctively going to her belly as the baby kicked in response to her distress. He gave a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. "Talk to you, that's rich. You know, for a man who deals in data and analytics, I can't believe how blind I've been." "Blind to what, Donovan? You're scaring me." He walked towards her, his 6'2" frame seeming to suck all the air from the room. He stopped just before her, looking down, not at her, but at her pregnant form, and his lip curled in a sneer of such profound disgust that it stole her breath. "That's the masterstroke, isn't it?" he said, his voice a low, venomous whisper. "The ultimate leverage, the perfect insurance policy. But it's not going to work." Tears pricked at Alice's eyes. This was more than stress. This was something dark and twisted. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," he said, turning his back on her again. "The party's over, Alice, in every possible way." He left the room, leaving her standing alone, the emerald silk of her dress feeling like a costume for a life that was no longer hers. The city lights outside glittered mockingly, and the silence of the penthouse was suddenly deafening. The storm she had sensed was no longer on the horizon. It had arrived, and it was about to break right over her head. The next morning, the silence in the penthouse was a living entity. It breathed in the spaces between them, thick and suffocating. Alice hadn't slept. She had sat in the nursery, rocking in the glider Donovan had insisted on buying her hand, tracing the painted fawns and rabbits on the wall. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It came not with a thud, but with the force of a battering ram. She found Donovan in the dining room, a room that had hosted senators and foreign dignitaries. Today, its sole occupants were him and a manila folder placed squarely in the center of the polished mahogany table. He was dressed not in one of his bespoke suits, but in casual, almost severe black trousers and a grey Henley shirt. He looked like he was preparing for battle. "Sit down," he commanded, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Alice's legs felt weak. She slowly lowered herself into the chair opposite him, the vast expanse of the table feeling like a courtroom. "Donovan, please, just tell me what this is about. We can fix it. Whatever it is, we can fix it." "Fix it?" He laughed again, that same horrifying, joyless sound from the night before. He tapped the folder with a manicured finger. "There's no fixing treason, Alice." "Treason? That's a ridiculous word." I don't..." He opened the folder and slid a document across the table. It was a printout of an email. Her name was in the from field. The recipient was a name she vaguely recognized: Arthur Kendrick, the CEO of Innovatech Nexus Dynamics' most aggressive competitor. The email contained a detailed attachment, a file named Project Chimera specs.pdf. Project Chimera, Donovan said, his voice a low growl. Our most confidential, most revolutionary project. Neural interface technology, worth billions. It's the future of this company, my company. And you emailed the entire specification sheet to our biggest rival. Alice stared at the paper, her heart pounding against her ribs. This isn't real. I didn't write this. Donovan, I wouldn't even know how to find a file like that. This is a fake. It has to be. He slid another paper across. It was a bank statement, a wire transfer for $250,000 into a savings account, an account in her name. The transfer was from a shell corporation known to be a front for Innovatech. I suppose this is fake too, he spat. You set up the account 6 months ago. The transfer came through last week. A down payment, I assume. For selling me out. For selling us out. An account in my name, Donovan. I swear to you I have never seen this before in my life. Someone is setting me up. Her mind raced, grasping for an explanation. Who? Why? It made no sense. Oh, someone is, and she's sitting right in front of me, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. It all makes sense now. The art historian from a modest background, so wide-eyed and impressed by all this. He gestured vaguely at the opulence surrounding them. I thought it was charming. I thought it was genuine. How stupid I was. You were playing the long game from the start. No, that's not true. I love you. The words sounded weak even to her own ears against the mountain of evidence he had before him. Love. He stood up his chair, scraping harshly against the marble floor. He began to pace his movements, agitated like a caged tiger. Was it love when you were cozying up to my head of R&D, batting your eyelashes to get access codes? Was it love when you were meeting with them? Caleb saw you. Caleb Thorne. Donovan's right-hand man, the COO of Nexus Dynamics. A man Alice had always found unsettlingly slick with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Caleb, I had coffee with him and Vanessa Lynch from marketing 2 weeks ago. You know that. We were discussing the Nexus Charity Foundation. Vanessa funny. You should mention her, Donovan sneered. Caleb thought you seemed awfully interested in her project access levels. He said you were jealous of her. He thought you were worried I had a thing for her, so you decided to lash out to hurt the company out of spite. I defended you. I told him he was crazy. I said my wife wasn't like that. His face contorted into a mask of pure rage and betrayal. And then he brought me this. He slapped the folder. He hired a private cybersecurity firm. They traced it all back to your personal laptop, your IP address. You were careful using encrypted channels, but they found it. They found everything. Every word was a nail in her coffin. A coffin built by someone she didn't know, for reasons she couldn't fathom. But Donovan believed it. He believed every poisoned word. Donovan, look at me, she begged, tears now streaming down her face. Look at me, and tell me you truly believe I would do this. That I would throw away our life, our marriage, our child's future, for money. He stopped pacing and stared at her, and his stormy eyes were filled with a chilling certainty. The evidence is absolute. You saw an opportunity and you took it. The pregnancy was just the final, disgusting cherry on top. You thought I'd never suspect my pregnant wife. You thought if I did, I wouldn't dare throw you out because of the baby." He leaned across the table, his face inches from hers. His voice dropped to a deadly calm. "You miscalculated. The baby changes nothing. In fact, it makes it worse. To know that my child, my heir, has been carried by a woman like you, it turns my stomach." Alice felt a physical blow as if he'd struck her. Her hands flew to her belly, a protective shield. "Donovan, don't say that." "It's the truth," he said, straightening up and walking towards the door. "I want you out of my house. Today." Out. Out where, Donovan, I'm due any day. I have nothing. Everything I have is tied to you, to us. He turned at the doorway, his expression as hard and unyielding as the granite countertops in the kitchen. "That's the point," he said, his voice ringing with the finality of a judge's gavel. "I want you to leave with nothing. The clothes on your back. That's it. My lawyers have already been instructed. The joint accounts are frozen. The credit cards are cancelled. The prenuptial agreement you signed is ironclad, especially in cases of gross misconduct and breach of trust. You will get nothing from me. Not a dim." "You can't do this," she whispered, her world crumbling to dust around her. "I can, and I am," he said, his gaze flicking one last time to her, filled not with sorrow, but with a cold, cleansing fire. "You are a liability I am cutting from my life. Be gone by the end of the day. If you're not, I'll have security escort you out." He turned and walked away, the sound of his footsteps echoing on the marble, each one a final, brutal severance of the life they had built together. Alice was left alone at the giant mahogany table with the damning fraudulent papers and the crushing weight of his verdict. She was 9 months pregnant, and she had just been sentenced to exile with nothing. The hours that followed Donovan's decree were a surreal waking nightmare. The vibrant, sun-drenched penthouse transformed into a mausoleum of a dead marriage. The staff, the cook, the housekeeper moved about with downcast eyes, whispering in hushed tones, avoiding her gaze as if her shame were contagious. Alice knew the word was out. She was no longer the lady of the house. She was a disgraced woman on a deadline. She walked through the rooms, each one a painful diorama of her former life. The living room, where they'd decorated their first Christmas tree together. The kitchen, where she'd tried and failed spectacularly to bake his favorite lemon meringue pie, covering them both in flour. The library, where they'd read side by side on rainy Sunday afternoons. Every object, every piece of furniture was a ghost. Her first instinct was to fight, to scream, to throw things towards, to find Donovan and force him to see the truth. But what truth could she offer? Her word against a pile of fabricated evidence presented by his most trusted associate. Donovan was a man of data. He believed in what he could see and prove. Feelings were variables he had long since learned to discard. A wave of exhaustion, deep and bone-weary, washed over her. The baby was low, pressing on her hips, a constant heavy reminder of the life she was responsible for. Her anger and despair receded, replaced by a primal protective instinct. She couldn't fall apart. Not now. She went to their bedroom. Her closet was a testament to Donovan's generosity, racks of designer dresses, shelves of expensive shoes, drawers of silk and cashmere. "The clothes on your back," he had said. She looked down at the simple maternity dress she was wearing. So this was it. Her eyes fell on a small, worn leather jewelry box on her nightstand. It contained none of the diamonds or pearls Donovan had bought her. Inside were her grandmother's silver locket and a simple gold band that had been her mother's. These were her real treasures, the things that connected her to a life before Donovan Sterling. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Would he consider this nothing? A guard was already posted discreetly by the apartment's main entrance. She wouldn't risk the humiliation of having her mother's ring confiscated. She left the box a silent, painful sacrifice. She packed a single tote bag, the one she'd used for her Lamaze classes. Inside, she placed her wallet, which contained less than $100 in cash, her phone, which she suspected would soon be disconnected, and a worn paperback she'd been reading. She added a baby blanket she had knitted herself, its soft pastel yarn, a stark contrast to the cold dread in her heart. The hardest part was the nursery. She pushed open the door, and the scent of new paint and clean linen filled her senses. The mural of the whimsical forest seemed to mock her. The Scandinavian pine crib stood empty, a perfect, beautiful vessel for a child who would now never sleep in it. A mobile of hand-carved wooden animals dangled from the ceiling, turning slowly in the air currents. Donovan had spent a week searching for it online. Her knees buckled. She sank into the plush rocking chair, the one she'd dreamed of nursing her baby in, and the sobs she had been suppressing finally broke free. They were ragged, desperate sounds that were swallowed by the thick, sound-proofed walls of the penthouse. She cried for her lost love, for the man Donovan used to be. She cried for the future that had been stolen from them. And most of all, she cried for her baby, who was about to be born into a world of conflict and loss instead of one of love and security. She didn't know how long she sat there rocking back and forth, her tears dampening the front of her dress. The light outside began to fade, casting long shadows across the room. She knew her time was running out. As she rocked, she began to whisper to the child within her, her voice thick with emotion. It was a habit she'd formed over the months, a one-sided conversation with the person she already loved more than life itself. It was in this moment, a moment of profound and private grief, that the nursery door creaked open. Donovan stood there. He hadn't meant to come back. He'd been in his office trying to bury himself in work, to cauterize the wound of her betrayal with the heat of corporate warfare. But he couldn't focus. An unsettling feeling, a dissonant chord in the symphony of his certainty, kept pulling at him. He told himself he was just going back to make sure she was gone, to see the liability fully removed from his asset sheet. He expected to find her defiantly packing priceless jewelry or hysterically pleading with the staff. He did not expect to find her here, in the heart of their shared dream, looking so utterly broken. She hadn't seen him. Her back was to the door as she sat in the glider, her hands wrapped around her belly, her body swaying in a gentle, rhythmic motion. He was about to say something cold and final, something to hurry her along. But then he heard her voice, a soft, tear-choked whisper, directed not at him, but at the child she carried. He froze in the doorway, hidden in the shadows, and he listened. The acoustics of the nursery, designed to be a peaceful haven, carried Alice's whispered words to where Donovan stood unseen in the doorway. He was prepared for venom, for curses, for whispered promises of revenge that would justify his actions. He was ready to hear her plotting, to hear her lamenting the loss of her golden ticket. What he heard instead struck him with the force of a physical blow. "Oh, my sweet little one," Alice murmured, her hand rubbing slow, soothing circles on her belly. The sob in her voice was raw, unfiltered. "Please don't be scared. Mama's here. I know there's a lot of shouting, a lot of sad energy. But you're safe." I'll always keep you safe." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "I need you to be strong for me. Okay, we're going on a little adventure, you and I. It's not the one we planned. There won't be a big fancy room waiting for you. Or any of these silly painted animals." A tear dripped from her chin onto her hand. "But we'll have each other, and that's all that matters. We'll find a small, sunny place, and I'll sing to you every night." Donovan's blood ran cold. This wasn't the voice of a greedy, manipulative traitor. This was the voice of a mother. "And you must never, ever doubt your father," Alice whispered, her voice dropping lower more intensely, as if sharing a sacred secret. Donovan leaned forward, straining to hear. "Don't listen to the anger. Your papa, he is a good man. He's a brilliant, passionate man who builds incredible things. He gets lost sometimes. The world he lives in is loud and complicated, and sometimes it makes him forget how to listen to his heart." A knot of something unfamiliar and painful tightened in Donovan's chest. It felt like a band of steel constricting his lungs. "He loves you," Alice continued, her voice cracking. "He loved you from the moment he knew you existed. I saw it in his eyes. And what he's doing now, he's doing it because he's hurt. He's been tricked. Someone filled his head with lies, my love, and he's in so much pain that he can't see the truth. So we can't be angry with him. We have to forgive him." Donovan felt his meticulously constructed reality begin to fracture. The narrative he had accepted, the one painted for him by Caleb, supported by cold, hard data, had no room for this. A gold-digging spy doesn't defend the man she's betraying to their unborn child. She doesn't speak of his pain, his goodness. She doesn't preach forgiveness in her darkest hour. "We'll be okay," Alice whispered, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "I'll get a job. We'll make it work, and one day when you're older, maybe you'll meet him, and you'll see what I see. You'll see the good man who got lost in the storm, and you'll love him too, because he's a part of you, always." She kissed her own hand, then pressed it to her belly. "I love you. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. It's you and me now." Donovan staggered back silently, retreating from the doorway before she could see him. He stumbled down the hall and into his study, closing the door and leaning against it, his heart hammering against his ribs. Her words echoed in his mind, playing on a loop. He's been tricked. Someone filled his head with lies. He had dismissed her claims of being framed as the desperate pleas of the guilty. He had trusted Caleb implicitly. Caleb had been with him for 10 years, his most loyal lieutenant. He had trusted the data, the cybersecurity report from the independent firm Caleb had hired. Data doesn't lie. But Alice's whisper, it wasn't data. It was raw, undeniable truth. It was the sound of a heart breaking, not for lost wealth, but for a lost love and a broken family. It was a testament of unwavering faith in him, even after he had leveled his entire world. The image of her alone in the nursery, comforting their child and defending him, was a brutal contradiction to the picture of the scheming traitor he had so readily accepted. The certainty that had been his shield for the past 24 hours crumbled, leaving him exposed and raw. A seed of doubt, small but potent, was planted in the barren ground of his fury. He walked to the window and stared down at the city. For the first time, he didn't see an empire at his feet. He saw 1,000,000 tiny lives, each one as complex and messy as his own. He had made a decision based on evidence. He had cut out a cancer to save the body. It was logical. It was efficient. So why did he feel like he had just amputated his own heart? He heard the soft click of the penthouse door closing. He ran to the security monitor, a small screen by his desk. He saw her on the camera standing in the private elevator lobby, just her and her single tote bag. She didn't look back. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside, and she was gone. He had won. He had protected his company. He had expelled the traitor. He sank into his leather chair, the silence of the massive apartment pressing in on him. He was alone with his victory, and it felt exactly like defeat. The seed of doubt began to sprout. He's been tricked. Someone filled his head with lies. The whisper was louder now, and it was no longer just Alice's voice. It was his own. The elevator descended 40 floors, each one stripping away another layer of Alice's old life. When the doors opened onto the grand doorman-attended lobby, she squared her shoulders and walked out into the humid evening air of Manhattan, a queen dethroned. She didn't look back at the limestone monolith. It was no longer her home. It was just a building. Her first and only call was to Sophia Russo. They had been friends since college, an unlikely pair. Alice, the quiet art historian. Sophia, the sharp-tongued, fiercely loyal law student who was now a junior partner at a family law firm. "Soph, it's me." Alice's voice was barely a whisper. "Ames, where are you?" "I've been calling. Your phone kept going to voicemail. Is everything okay?" "Is it the baby?" "The baby's fine." Alice said the words catching in her throat. "But everything else isn't. Donovan, he threw me out." There was a stunned silence on the other end, then an explosion of protective fury. "He did what, that son of a bitch? Where are you? I'm coming to get at you." An hour later, Alice was curled on a slightly lumpy but wonderfully welcoming sofa in Sophia's cramped one-bedroom apartment in Greenwich Village. It was a world away from the sterling penthouse. Here books were stacked on every available surface. A half-finished jigsaw puzzle covered the coffee table, and the air smelled of coffee and Sophia's lavender perfume. It smelled like safety. As Sophia made tea, Alice told her everything, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain and confusion. The accusation, the evidence, Caleb Thorne, the final brutal command to leave with nothing. Sophia listened, her expression hardening from concern to steely resolve. She placed a mug of chamomile tea in Alice's trembling hands. "Okay. First of all, none of this is your fault. You've been framed, that's obvious. Donovan is a brilliant businessman, but he's an emotional infant, and this Caleb guy sounds like Iago whispering in Othello's ear. But the evidence, Soph, the emails, the bank account, forged, all of it. It's surprisingly easy to do if you have the right resources, and it sounds like this Caleb character had a vested interest in getting you out of the picture. We're going to fight this, Ames. I'll represent you pro bono. We'll sue him for wrongful dismissal from the marriage, for slander, for—" "No," Alice said quietly, shaking her head. "No fight. Not now." Sophia stared at her. "What do you mean, no fight?" "Alice, he left you 9 months pregnant with nothing but the clothes on your back, based on a lie." "I know," Alice said, her gaze distant. "But my priority right now isn't a legal battle. It's this baby." She placed a hand on her stomach. "I can't spend the next year of my life, my child's first year, in a bitter war with his father. I need peace. I need to be strong for him. I just want to disappear and start over." Sophia looked like she wanted to argue, But then she saw the profound exhaustion in her friend's eyes and the fierce maternal set of her jaw. She sighed, her anger softening into deep sympathy. "Okay, Ames. Okay. We do it your way. You stay here as long as you need. This is your home now." The next few weeks were a strange, humbling blur. Alice, who had grown accustomed to a life of effortless luxury, learned to navigate the subway again, to budget her dwindling cash for groceries, to find joy in simple things. Sophia was her rock, her fierce protector, and her comic relief. They fell into a comfortable domestic routine. Alice needed to work. Her pride wouldn't let her live off Sophia indefinitely. Her reputation in the high-end art world was now tied to the Sterling name, a name that was likely poison. So she looked elsewhere. She found a part-time job at a small independent bookstore in the West Village, The Last Word. The owner, a kind elderly man named Mr. Henderson, hired her on the spot, charmed by her knowledge of literature and unbothered by her heavily pregnant state. The pay was barely enough to cover her share of the groceries, but the work was a balm for her soul. She spent her days surrounded by the smell of old paper and ink, organizing shelves and recommending books to strangers. For the first time in a long time, she felt like herself again. Not Mrs. Sterling, the billionaire's wife, but Alice, a woman who loved stories. She was building a new life, a small, quiet life, piece by piece. Meanwhile, 60 blocks north, Donovan Sterling was rattling around in his empty empire. He had expected to feel relief, a sense of rightness. Instead, a profound emptiness had taken root in the penthouse. Alice's absence was a physical presence. The rooms felt too big, too quiet. Her orchids in the greenhouse were beginning to wilt. The nursery door remained closed, a silent monument to his folly. Alice's whispered words from that terrible afternoon haunted him. "He's been tricked. We have to forgive him." They gnawed at the edges of his conviction. He threw himself into work with a vengeance, but the satisfaction had soured. He'd sit in board meetings, and Caleb Thorne would be at his side, smoother and more sycophantic than ever, offering opinions and strategies. Donovan started watching him, really watching him. He noticed the flash of triumph in Caleb's eyes when Project Chimera was mentioned. He saw how Caleb subtly steered conversations away from certain topics, how he managed information flow with a gatekeeper's precision. One evening, Donovan was reviewing the final cybersecurity report again. He was a tech genius. He understood this world better than anyone. Before, he'd been blinded by rage. Now, with the seed of doubt growing into a thorny vine in his gut, he looked at it with fresh, critical eyes. He noticed a small discrepancy. The IP address from Alice's laptop had been routed through a series of public proxies to mask its origin, a classic technique. But one of the proxy exit nodes listed in the report, a server based in Estonia, had a flag on it. It was a server his own Nexus security team had blacklisted months ago as being compromised and notoriously unreliable for accurate data tracing. The independent firm Caleb had hired should have known that. It was a rookie mistake, or a deliberate obfuscation. It was a tiny crack, but it was enough. The foundations of his certainty began to groan under the strain. He remembered Alice's face, her genuine shock and confusion. He remembered her whisper filled with love and forgiveness for him. He closed the report. The emptiness of the penthouse felt like a judgment. He had everything he had ever wanted, the company, the wealth, the power. He had successfully protected it all. So why did he feel like he had absolutely nothing at all? He was a king on an empty throne, ruler of a silent, sterile kingdom he had built with his own 2 hands, and he had never felt more impoverished. The tiny crack in Donovan's certainty widened into a chasm. The discrepancy in the cybersecurity report became an obsession. It was a loose thread, and Donovan Sterling, a man who built systems of flawless logic, couldn't resist the urge to pull it. He decided to act, but with the calculated stealth of a predator. If Caleb had truly orchestrated this, he was a far more dangerous snake than Donovan had ever imagined. A direct confrontation would only make him cover his tracks. Donovan needed his own evidence, his own data, and he needed it to be untainted. He made a call, not to his current head of security, a man Caleb had recommended, but to a ghost from his past. A man named Frank Miller, a legendary semi-retired cyber forensics analyst who had helped Donovan's first startup fend off a catastrophic hack a decade ago. Frank was paranoid, brilliant, and owed Donovan a favor. He operated completely off the grid. "Frank, it's Donovan Sterling," he said, using a burner phone from the privacy of his study. "Sterling, thought you'd be too busy counting your billions to call old dinosaurs like me." Frank's gravelly voice crackled over the line. "I need your eyes on something, Frank. Something personal. And it needs to be completely invisible. No one can know you're looking." Donovan encrypted the entire case file Caleb had given him, the emails the bank records the cybersecurity report, and sent it to Frank's secure server. He didn't give him any context, no story of a cheating wife. He just said, "Find the flaws. Tell me if this is airtight or if it's a frame job." While Frank worked his digital magic, Donovan began his own, more analog investigation. He started with the people. He invited his old retired CFO, a wise and fatherly man named Mr. Abernathy, for a drink under the guise of seeking advice on a new acquisition. After 2 glasses of fine scotch, Donovan steered the conversation. "Henry," he said casually, "you've always had a good read on people. What's your take on Caleb Thorne?" Mr. Abernathy swirled his drink, his expression thoughtful. "Caleb is ambitious, incredibly so. He's a shark, Donovan, and a damn good one. That's why you hired him. But a shark is always hungry. He's loyal to the company as long as the company is synonymous with you. But he's most loyal to his own advancement." The old man paused, fixing Donovan with a knowing gaze. "He was always a bit jealous of your happiness with Alice, you know. He once made a comment to me at a Christmas party, something about how a man at your level can't afford soft spots. He saw her as a liability, not a partner." The comment landed like a stone in Donovan's gut. A soft spot. A liability. The very words he himself had used. Had Caleb planted them in his head? Next, Donovan arranged a chance encounter with Vanessa Lynch, the marketing executive Caleb had implicated. He caught her by the coffee machine in the office kitchen. "Vanessa, a quick word," he said, adopting his usual brisk CEO tone. "A few weeks back, you had coffee with Alice and Caleb Thorne. Regarding the foundation." Vanessa looked slightly flustered. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. That's right." Caleb mentioned that Alice seemed overly interested in your project access levels. He suggested she might have been jealous. Did you get that impression? Vanessa's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. Jealous of me, absolutely not. She was lovely. She barely asked me about work at all. In fact, it was Mr. Thorne who kept bringing up R&D security protocols. He was making jokes about corporate plowaisa, saying how easy it would be to get information if you were on the inside. I remember thinking it was a bit of a strange conversation for a charity meeting. Alice looked uncomfortable. Donovan's blood ran cold. Caleb hadn't just reported a conversation, he had orchestrated it. He had created the very scenario he would later use as evidence with Vanessa as an unwitting prop. The final devastating pieces of the puzzle arrived 3 days later in a heavily encrypted message from Frank Miller. The message was blunt. "This isn't a frame job. It's a masterpiece of one." Frank's report was a systematic demolition of Caleb's narrative. 1. The email. Frank's analysis showed that the email to Arthur Kendrick hadn't originated from Alice's laptop at all. It was sent from a burner device that had spoofed her laptop's hardware ID. The traffic was then routed through the compromised Estonian proxy server Donovan had spotted specifically to create a false data trail that would lead back to her if anyone looked. It was a sophisticated plant. 2. The bank account. The offshore account in Alice's name had been opened using stolen identity markers, a copy of a passport she'd submitted for a visa application months prior, information Caleb would have had access to through the company's HR files. The digital signature used to open the account was a clever forgery. 3. The independent firm. Frank did some digging into the cybersecurity company Caleb had hired. It was a shell. Its ownership traced back through a labyrinth of other companies to a holding corporation registered in the Cayman Islands, and the principal owner of that corporation, Caleb Thorne. He hadn't hired a firm. He'd used his own puppet company to create the report he needed. He had investigated and confirmed his own lies. The most damning piece of evidence was the last one. Frank had managed to hack into the holding corporation's financials. He found a recent major expenditure, a down payment on a controlling share package of Innovatech, their main rival. It was pending finalization. And there were email fragments between Caleb and Arthur Kendrick, the CEO of Innovatech. The plan was suddenly sickeningly clear. Caleb wasn't just trying to get rid of Alice. He was orchestrating a coup. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. Frame Alice for leaking Project Chimera. Use the scandal to sow chaos and doubt in Nexus Dynamics' board. In the ensuing panic, devalue the company's stock. Then in partnership with Kendrick's, insider knowledge and their combined capital to initiate a hostile takeover of a weakened Nexus Dynamics. Getting rid of Alice wasn't the main goal. She was just collateral damage, a pawn used to emotionally cripple Donovan and distract him while the real attack was prepared. He had used Donovan's love for Alice as the very weapon to bring him down. Donovan stared at the screen, the words blurring through a haze of rage and self-loathing. He saw it all. Caleb's feigned concern, his carefully chosen words, his masterful manipulation of Donovan's own worst tendencies, his pride, his paranoia, his readiness to believe the worst. He had been played, not just as a CEO, but as a man, as a husband. He thought of Alice alone, pregnant, cast out with nothing, while the great Donovan Sterling, had swallowed the bait hook, line, and sinker. The shame was a physical thing burning in his throat like acid. He stood up his chair, flying back and hitting the wall. The cold fury he'd directed at Alice was nothing compared to the white-hot inferno that now consumed him. The unraveling was complete. Now it was time for the reckoning. The rage that filled Donovan was a clean, purifying fire. All the confusion, the doubt, the gnawing guilt of the past few weeks coalesced into a single point of cold, diamond-hard purpose. He wasn't just going to fire Caleb Thorne. He was going to dismantle him. He acted immediately. He summoned his personal legal team, not the corporate sharks, but the ruthless litigators he kept on retainer for the bloodiest fights. He forwarded them Frank Miller's entire report. The instructions were simple. Prepare a case for corporate espionage, wire fraud, and conspiracy. I want him ruined. I want him to face criminal charges. And I want injunctions filed to freeze every asset he has by morning. Go. Next, he called an emergency virtual meeting of the Nexus Dynamics board for 8 a.m. the following day. The agenda was listed as urgent hostile takeover threat and internal malfeasance. He CC'd Caleb, of course. Let the snake think he was coming to a strategy session. But all of that was business. It was secondary. The primary mission, the only thing that truly mattered, was Alice. A frantic, desperate panic seized him. She was out there alone, nearly due to give birth. Where was she? How was she surviving? He had cut off her funds, her home, her entire support system. The thought of her struggling and vulnerable while he had been stewing in his mansion made him physically ill. He was a monster. A fool and a monster. He tried her phone first, as he'd suspected the line was disconnected. He checked the activity on her old credit cards. They were, as per his own orders, inactive. He felt a surge of self-hatred. He ran to the security office in his building, demanding the logs for the day she left. He saw her get into a yellow taxi. He had the doorman, a kind man named George, track down the cab company and the driver. An hour and a hefty tip later, the driver confirmed he'd dropped her off at an address in Greenwich Village. Donovan punched the address into his GPS. As he raced to his car, his phone buzzed. It was Sophia Russo. Alice must have listed her as an emergency contact on some old paperwork. His heart leaped into his throat. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice ragged, dispensing with all pleasantries. Sophia's voice was pure ice. "You have an astonishing amount of nerve calling this number Sterling. After what you did, you should pray you never see her again." "Sophia, please," he begged, the arrogance stripped from his voice, replaced by raw desperation. "I know everything. I was wrong. I was a fool. I was manipulated. Caleb Thorne framed her. I have proof. Absolute proof." There was a pause on the line. He could hear Sophia's skepticism warring with the genuine panic in his voice. "Proof? I'll send it to you. I'll send you everything. Just please, tell me she's okay. Is the baby—" "The baby hasn't come yet," Sophia said, her tone softening almost imperceptibly. "But she's close, very close. She's been having contractions all afternoon." Donovan's world tilted on its axis. "Contractions, you have to tell me where you are. Are you at the apartment? Are you at a hospital? Why? So you can swoop in with your billions and play the hero after you tried to destroy her." Sophia shot back, her protective instincts flaring. "No," Donovan shouted, leaning his forehead against the cold window of his car. "So I can beg for her forgiveness. So I can be there for her, for our child. Sophia, I love her. I know I have no right, but I do. I was poisoned against her, and I fell for it. Please, I'm begging you. Don't punish her because of my sins." He could hear Sophia take a deep breath. She was a lawyer. She could recognize the sound of a man who had seen the evidence and knew he was on the losing side. More than that, she was Alice's friend, and she could likely hear the agonizing sincerity in his plea. "She went into active labor an hour ago," Sophia said finally, her voice strained. "We're at Lenox Hill Hospital, maternity ward, 5th floor." "I'm on my way," Donovan said, not waiting for a reply. He slammed the car into gear, tearing out of his private garage and into the Manhattan traffic with a recklessness that mirrored the storm in his soul. He drove like a madman, laying on the horn, weaving between cars. Every red light was a personal affront. Every traffic jam was a fresh twist of the knife. His mind raced. What would he say? Sorry, I accused you of treason and threw you out on the street while you were carrying my child. It was unforgivable. He knew it. But he had to try. He had to be there. He called his assistant. Cancel my morning, all of it, and get a message to Henry Abernathy. Tell him to run the 8 a.m. board meeting. Show him the files I just sent to my legal team. Tell him to handle Caleb Thorne. Tell him to burn him to the ground. He hung up. Business was done. Now there was only Alice. He screeched to a halt in front of the hospital's emergency entrance, tossing the keys to a stunned valet. Don't let them tow it, he barked before sprinting through the automatic doors. He found the maternity ward, his expensive shoes squeaking on the polished linoleum floors. He looked wildly around the nurse's station, a disheveled billionaire in a wrinkled shirt, his hair a mess, his eyes wide with panic. Alice Sterling, he asked, his voice breathless. I'm her husband. A nurse looked up, her expression calm and professional. She's in delivery room 3, right down that hall. You just made it. He ran. The hallway seemed to stretch for miles. He could hear a muffled cry from behind one of the doors. His heart hammered. He reached room 3 and pushed the door open. The scene inside stopped him cold. Sophia was there, holding one of Alice's hands. And Alice, she was in the bed, her face pale and beaded with sweat, her hair plastered to her forehead. She was in the middle of a powerful contraction, her eyes squeezed shut, her knuckles white as she gripped the bed rail. She was beautiful and fierce, a warrior in the midst of the most primal of battles, and he, her husband, had almost missed it. He had almost let her fight this battle all alone. The full weight of his catastrophic failure crashed down on him, and he felt his knees weaken. Donovan burst through the door of delivery room 3, his chest heaving. The scene stopped him cold, Alice pale and sweat-drenched in the throes of labor with Sophia holding her hand. Get out! Sophia snarled, standing up as a protective barrier. No! Alice whispered, her voice raspy with effort. Let him stay. Ignoring Sophia's glare, Donovan crossed the room in 3 strides and fell to his knees beside the bed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate shame. He took her free hand. Alice, he choked out, his voice breaking. It was a lie, all of it. Caleb framed you. I was a fool, a monster. I heard what you whispered in the nursery, about forgiving me. I don't deserve it. I'm begging you. Tears streamed down his face as another contraction seized her. She squeezed his hand with incredible force, and he held on, whispering encouragement, channeling all his regret and love into that single point of contact. Moments later, the doctor's calm voice cut through the tension. Okay, Alice, one big push. Let's meet this baby. The world narrowed to her primal effort, and then a sharp, indignant cry filled the room, slicing through the years of pain and misunderstanding. It's a girl, the doctor announced, smiling warmly. A beautiful, healthy daughter. They laid the tiny, wailing bundle on Alice's chest. Donovan stared, his face a mask of awe and wonder. He reached out a trembling finger to stroke his daughter's cheek, his entire empire fading into insignificance next to this small miracle. Later, when the room was quiet and Sophia had stepped out, Alice looked at him. The anger was gone, replaced by a clear-eyed exhaustion. What you did broke my trust completely. Donovan, she said, her voice soft but firm. It's not something that can be fixed overnight. I know, he said, his voice thick with humility. I will spend the rest of my life earning it back if you'll let me. Alice looked from his shattered expression to the sleeping face of her daughter in the bassinet beside her. "For her sake," she said softly, "you can start today." A sliver of hope, fragile but real, entered his eyes. "Does she have a name?" he asked. Alice managed a small, tired smile. "I was thinking, Grace." The word hit him with the force of a physical blow. Grace. Unmerited favor, forgiveness. It was everything he didn't deserve and everything she was offering. "Grace." He repeated the name, a prayer on his lips. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but in a room that had been destined for a mother and child with nothing, they were now a family of 3, with the one thing that truly mattered: Grace. Donovan and Alice's story is a powerful reminder that true wealth is not measured in billions of dollars or stock prices, but in trust, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond of family. It shows us how easily pride and suspicion can blind us, and how the simple, honest words of the heart can shatter the most elaborate lies. Alice's strength wasn't in fighting back with anger, but in protecting her child with a love so pure it planted a seed of doubt in a heart that had been closed to everything but the bottom line. It was a whisper of forgiveness that ultimately screamed louder than any betrayal. What do you think? Could you forgive someone who had hurt you so deeply? Was Donovan's apology enough, or does he still have a long way to go to truly earn back Alice's trust? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of heartbreak, resilience, and ultimate redemption moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing it with a friend who appreciates a powerful story, and be sure to subscribe to our channel. We have so many more real-life dramas to share with you, stories that explore the incredible complexities of the human heart. Thank you for listening.